All right. Hey, friends, welcome back. This is Ashley with Uncommon Roots Homestead. And today I'm super excited to have my friend Jill from Whispering Willow Farm here.
Hey guys.
She and I actually started this conversation over on her channel, and there was just more to talk about. So here we are. So kind of like a recap, if you haven't seen that video, I'll make sure to link it below and go check it out because we kind of set up the conversation over there. But we are talking about why we're here and why everybody has a place in the garden and kind of telling you our stories. It's cold outside. There is no better time of year or just in the world right now than to sit home with a cup of coffee by your fireplace and chat with some friends. So that's what we want to do with you guys today. And I thought it would be really cool for Jill to come on and kind of share her story with you guys. So Jill, tell me how you got here.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. All of Ashley's viewers, hello. I'm real excited to be with you guys today. So I am Jill. I own and operate Whispering Willow Farm. I am in Central Arkansas, and although I do farm full time, it's weird saying that. You know what I mean? Like it still is. You're like, oh yeah, I farm. I do a lot of things. But it started as a passion. When I was in high school and college, I worked for a cattle farm and I was going to school for agriculture. And that was when I really realized that farming was not just cows and horses. When I had thought of farmers, I had originally, that's where my mind went. I thought cattle farmers, chicken farmers. I didn't really realize that vegetable farmers were a thing. Just so naive and just did not know a thing about it. Then when I started realizing that people did that for a living, I became really intrigued. I started my first garden in a subdivision, just a small plot. It was kind of pitiful, but I did it.
I can relate.
Yeah. So it was kind of pitiful, but I did it. And then we moved. I ended up getting married. We moved. We had more space. I began to expand my garden. And then every year I felt like I just kept expanding until one day I was like, you know what? I want to do this for a living. For a long time, though, I battled with, or I wouldn't really say battled, but I would garden and I had this huge passion for it. I wanted to do that as a career, but then I still worked a normal job outside of the house. And I did that for several years. And every year I just keep adding more and more on. And I would tell myself, okay, one day you're going to do this for your job and it's going to be awesome. But it was a lot of years of just doing both of that. And that's something that I know you and I are going to talk about today, is that that's okay. This doesn't have to be your full-time career. And if you can definitely do both. I did that for many seasons, but now this is what I do all day, every day, and I absolutely love it. I love getting to share it with you guys as well.
Jill, I'm so impressed because I feel like you have such a cool story, and the experience that you kind of have sprinkled in from throughout your life is so cool. And I kind of feel like you undervalue that a little bit. You kind of just oh yeah, and I worked at this and I did that. And I'm like, what? Oh my gosh, she's so cool. But
yeah, I did battle. I'm a performer. I am a worker. I'm very works driven. And so, yeah, for a lot of years, I even worked at a hospital, 12-hour shifts, 312s. And I would get up before I had to be at work at 5-6 o'clock, and I'd start seeds, and then I'd go to work. I'd get off work at 7, lived an hour from the hospital, come home, and I would have a headlamp on harvesting tomatoes in the dark. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh. I wish that we had footage that now we could go back and play of Jill out in the dark.
I was dedicated.
I love it. I love it. No, but I do feel like that speaks so much to how these passions kind of evolve over time. And I know that we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but it's really important to me that we kind of set the stage for what does this lifestyle have to look like? And the answer is there's not one. This doesn't have to look the same for anyone. And Jill and I, we connected. If you want to know how we got connected, hop over to Jill's channel and listen to the last video. But we became fast friends and we have so much in common, but we're so different and we come from such different places. Our experience is different. The way that we grew up is different. Like everything is different, but yet we have so much common ground because we both found a place that gave us fulfillment in the garden. And that's available to everyone. And I think that's our purpose here, is to, just reaffirm that your story doesn't have to look like mine. You might have been following me for a little bit and you're like, man, that's not my story. That's okay. It doesn't have to look like Jill's either. Like,
it's not meant to be. My story is not meant to be your story or anyone else's. And that is the really cool and unique thing, is you get to create your own story. You get to write your own book and have a page or a chapter or a whole book of that. And that for me is what's super, super exciting.
It's super exciting. And, I think that so Jill talked a little bit about like working and doing the garden and having her passion be that she wanted to do that full time. And I come from a different place, right? I've spent 4 years in corporate America, or 12 years in corporate America. Gosh, if it was only 4, we'd be here. 4 years gardening. So I mixed my years up there. But I've spent the last 12 years living and operating in corporate America. And for the last 4 years, I've been really passionate about sustainability and gardening. And those things, I think on the surface, seem like they would be in conflict with each other. But I've found such synergy and such like freedom in allowing them to live together in harmony, and realizing that sustainability and homesteading and gardening, like those things are what adds quality to my life, and they don't have to be in conflict with, what I do during the day from 8 to 5. Like they don't have to be in conflict with each other. And I think that that's really encouraging. At least it's encouraging for me. And I know when I first started gardening, and I was like diving into research and starting to find like influencers that I was following and like videos that I was watching, there were definitely times that I felt a little bit defeated, and also a little bit like, if I really wanted to progress my career, I couldn't also want to be a homesteader. And I felt like I had to choose, and you don't have to choose. And I think that that's what Jill and I want to talk a little bit about. Jill, I know that you've kind of walked through that in your own way. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm a very transparent person, and that's exactly what I'm going to give out to you guys as well. I think that as long as you're like honest with your audience, you really can never go wrong. And comparison is a thing. It is a very real thing. And it's hard when you're in a season where you're wanting something, right? You're chasing after something, and maybe, it's an influencer you're looking up to. Maybe it's your close friends, and I have been in those seasons where I was, turned down, knocked down, doors closed in my face, and I had to be right there and encourage and support my friends that doors were opening. And, they had bigger gardens than I did. They had bigger farms than I did. They had all the things that I had been working so hard to achieve and to get to. Now, I wish I could sit before you guys and be like, oh, I handled it like a champ. I loved all my friends well, and all was hunky-dory. But that's not true. Like, I'm human, and it hurts when you work hard towards something and the door gets smacked in your face. That's a hard pill to swallow. But I knew that as a believer, I was called to support and rally around them. And I also knew that God cared about my dreams, and that my dreams didn't look like my friends' dreams or the influencers' dreams that I was, looking towards, or I was aspiring to be like, that I got to write my own story. And that's where we were talking about comparison versus inspiration. And through the years, as I have grown and just matured myself, and God's really been working and stirring in me to write my own story, and that I have my own purpose, I realized that I can be happy for them. And I draw inspiration from them now, instead of, looking at it, oh, I wish I had what they had. I don't. What they have is lovely. You guys may be looking at us and say, oh, I wish I had what they have. Don't, because what you have is lovely. And you are creating and growing and starting something, starting a new chapter. And that's really, really important. And you'll have to think that one day you'll be in a place where someone's going to draw inspiration from you. And Ashley and I kind of come from this place where I don't want anyone to compare themselves to me. I'm sure you don't want anyone to compare, themselves to you. It's more of draw inspiration from us. tweak it and figure out your why. What is your why behind gardening? Is it to meet needs for your family? Is it to have a career? Is it to influence or encourage people? And I feel like when you've really honed in on your why and your purpose for farming, gardening, homesteading, comparing yourself to someone else, it kind of nips it in the bud almost, because your why isn't their why. And what they do is catered toward theirs, towards their why. And when you figure out yours and you rally behind your dreams, you can draw inspiration, but you really, I think, kind of have that understanding and that knowledge of, you know what, I'm going to pursue my dreams. And it may take me longer than it took someone else. It may look different for me than it did for someone else, but it's still valuable and it's still worth pursuing. And that's something I had to tell myself in many seasons. My dreams look different, but they're still worth pursuing. And I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I'm going to keep adding garden beds. I'm going to keep doing it for what makes sense for me financially, for my space. And now here we are years later, and I have all this stuff, and I'm grateful that I didn't dive all in, because I probably would have flopped. Had I tried to do what someone else did, I couldn't sustain that. And
Right.
I do this by myself. For you, you work a corporate full-time job. You can't sustain throwing all these things in. And so just take it one step at a time, draw inspiration, but don't get caught up in that season of comparison, because you're really robbing yourself of a lot of joy and, devaluing what you really have to offer.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, it all boils down to, we all have a place in the garden, and the place doesn't always look the same. And you don't, like Jill was saying, you don't have to, like, if my first year gardening, when I just had one 4x8 bed in the side yard, if I had, instead of that one bed, if I had had an acre of crops to take care of, they all would have died. Like,
Yeah.
they all would have died. Like, I didn't have the knowledge to take care of them. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the resources. Like, there is so much to learn in gardening and in homesteading and, like, in all of this, that if you jump in where somebody else is today, when they're 10 years in and you're 10 minutes in, like, you're underprepared. Like, you're underprepared for that, because it took them 10 years to get there. And, like, I've been gardening for 4 years. I've spent 4 years killing plants, dealing with pests, doing the wrong things, using the wrong tools. Like, I've learned from each of those things that I did incorrectly, so that this year, as I'm preparing for the 2021 garden season, I know, okay, last year I did this and it didn't work. I overcrowded my peppers. And so my poor jalapenos were buried under this, like, trellis of leaves, and we got like 3 jalapenos. I know they need more space. I can't put 15 plants in 6 square feet. It just won't work. But, like, if you've never done it before, when the plants are this big, it seems like, yeah, let's throw a bunch of them in there. And, like, that's how you learn and grow. And now we have more space, and it's kind of like, the more you're given, the more is expected of you. And, like, that's a heavy thing to carry. So as you're taking inspiration and you're watching other people who maybe are farther along in their journey, protect yourself by realizing that that's not necessarily where you're supposed to be today. And you can be inspired by what they do. Like Joel was saying, you can be inspired by the varieties that they plant, and maybe choose one of those to plant yourself, and, like, start where you are and focus on what your space looks like, because that's how you start drawing inspiration, rather than comparing, like, well, Jill's chicken setup looks like this and mine looks like this, and, like, clearly, like, that doesn't add value to anything. It's not going to change Jill and her setup, and it's not going to make mine any different. So, like, it's just spending time focusing in on these negatives that are going to steal the purpose and the joy that I think Jill and I both believe the garden has for all of you.
And it's just embracing the season that you're in.
Yeah.
And everyone's season looks different. It's intended to look different.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I feel like when you have, like you said, that, appreciation and that joy, and this is something I have to tell myself too, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, like, I am a performer. I am very works-based. That is just how I am driven. And so I like going at it, and I like knowing that I'm achieving a lot of things and doing a lot of things. And it's hard for me to kind of sit back and refocus and be like, okay, you're in this season. This is all you can handle. Sometimes that is the hard thing. The hard thing isn't adding in crops. The hard thing isn't adding in chickens or, another animal on your homestead. Sometimes the hard thing is just being like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for this season, and I'm going to do this well. And if that is figuring out your tomato crops, if that is wanting to sell at the farmer's market, if that is adding in an animal, it may not be adding in animals in a garden and selling at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Pick one thing,
right?
Hone in on that one thing, learn it well, and then move on to the next thing. And I've learned from me, someone who is a achiever, a go-getter,
it's hard.
The real value is in saying, no, I'm going to take on one new thing. Even with the crops, I sell for profit. Like it's generally what we do. So most of the things I'm growing, I'm selling to restaurants and things like that. So with that, I don't really have the luxury of growing all these different varieties because they just don't sell as well. Unfortunately, if you guys are selling or thinking about that, you'll kind of figure that out. But I like growing the variety. I feel like I was missing out on something by seeing everybody growing all these things. And I'm like, well, why can't I grow that? And it doesn't make sense for me and my goals for my garden. But I give myself a rule that I can put in 3 new crops in my garden every year as experimental crops. And for me, that feeds my soul. It makes me feel good. It allows me that little bit of creativity in the garden, and it's not just the mundane growing the same crops to sell to the same consumer. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're, have a small space and you can only add in 1 crop every year. Do that. Find joy and fulfillment in that, and know in the seasons to come, you may get to add in 2 crops or 3 crops or whatever that may look like.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that because I am also a 3 on the Enneagram. And often what that means is I hone in on something. I'm like, I've got to have it today. I mean, you guys would not believe how much I would like a dairy cow today. But here's the thing. We don't live on our 14 acres yet. We live here in a subdivision. What am I going to do with a dairy cow? They're like, what are you going to do with that? So it's one of those things where it's I talk about this a lot, but in every season that we've walked through in our homesteading and gardening journey, we've tried to balance both the desire to dream really big and to not put our future in a box. I don't ever want to be this is all that 14 acres and a big garden. That's it. That's all I want to do. There's nothing else, because I've learned in my, 30 some years on this earth that is a recipe for disaster. If you try to put God in a box and say that this is all my future is going to hold, you're not gonna come out of it very good, because you're gonna be wrong, right? Don't put it in a box. You don't know how things are gonna evolve. 4 years ago when I had that 4x8 garden bed, if you would have told me that 4 years later I would have bought 14 acres and we'd be talking about using over an acre for garden space and having 22 chickens and wanting a dairy cow eventually, I would have laughed at you and then probably done everything possible to mess that up for myself down the road, right? So it's one of those things where it's dreaming really big, but finding the balance between that and finding contentment where you are. And right now we can't go out and buy all these animals. I can't go bring home a dairy cow. That is right. I know. That's not the season that I'm in. And so I hope that that's encouraging to you, because the dreaming and the wishing and the waiting, those seasons don't end. You can, even when you sit there and we do have 14 acres and I do have an acre of garden space and I do have 22 chickens and I do have space for all these things, I'm still waiting. And I'm still in a season of preparation and learning. And it's necessary, because in this time I've had to read books on keeping a dairy cow. And I've had to continue to learn about all of these other things that if I just had the resources today to do all of these things, oh my goodness, now we're not just talking about plants that I would have let die. We're talking about beings that I have to be a good steward over. And so I think that in every season that you're in, it's an opportunity to slow down and appreciate that you're never going to be in this place again. When I go and walk the land at night to close up the chicken coop, I was just thinking this the other day, never again in 9 months, when we move into our house and we live on that land, I'm not going to be walking around at 8 p.m. in the dark, appreciating the beauty of this space that God's given us, because it'll will be there. Like I'm probably not going to do that. And that's the reality of it. And it's kind of sad because I think that this time of just deep appreciation and like thankfulness and like dreaming about what this space could be, if we fast forward the next 10 years and see where it evolves, like I will have missed so much of the anticipation and the planning and the preparation and the learning. And though it's going to be hard and frustrating, like if you haven't watched a video on when we brought Fury home, go watch it because that was a nightmare. Like those things, like they're what adds up to make all of this worth it. And when you're looking at someone else from the outside, you don't always have the inside scoop to all of that learning and all of the preparation that they're doing in that season too. Even the biggest gardeners that you can find on YouTube or on Instagram or wherever, like they're still learning and they're still taking these things to heart. So it's like, we just want to encourage you that no matter where you are, we're all in a similar spot, believe it or not. And B, like you have so much opportunity. Like don't waste this opportunity being jealous or comparing what you have to what somebody else has, because you're robbing yourself of so much joy.
Yeah. And like Ashley was saying, you can really take this opportunity. Like she explained, she's reading on, a jersey. I really want dairy goats. And so I could get in this mindset of being envious of the other friends or farmers I know that have those. And instead, why? Like no one needs to be in that headspace. So instead I bought books and I'm spending my downtime learning everything I can. If you're not in a season where you can have the garden you want or the animals you want, grab books, take online courses, watch YouTube videos, just fill yourself with all the knowledge that you can. And one, it makes you feel good because then when you do jump into say maybe the animals or the garden and something happens, you'll be like, oh, I remember reading about this when I didn't even have a garden. I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's like this really fulfilling moment of, oh, I actually know something, and it's like this good feeling.
Yeah. And like the craziest thing is if you had all of those things that you're dreaming about right now, you might not have the time to do that research. And I know that Jill probably wouldn't have said it herself, but she's got a really great course out on beginning gardening and I will link it below. But just a wonderful resource that if you're in a place where you can't do that right now, start diving in and learning about it and really start to understand the foundations of what it takes to be a good gardener. Because the more tools that you have in your tool belt before you even start, the more successful you're going to be. I think almost every gardener I've ever talked to has a pretty rough first garden year story, right? Like where they have at least a couple of plants that didn't fare so well. And you can actually like save yourself from that by doing research up front and like learning before you even get started.
Yeah. And just know, even the most experienced gardeners, like this is what I do for my job. I still kill plants. Like if you take anything away from this, like, no, we still kill plants. That's okay. Yeah. Find one thing. This is something I even teach my children. Find one positive thing, find one positive thing you've learned from the garden or your animals, your homestead or whatever, and know that there is next season and things that I flop and things that I kill. Well, I can do it better next season. Take detailed notes of that and encourage yourself. When you do well, pat yourself on the back. And if you don't, say, that's okay. I'll go get them next time. Don't stay in that mindset of, oh, I can't do this. I failed at this. I feel like we really just need to shift our mindsets and be like, you know what? No, you can do this. Try again. Let's try it a different way and just really encourage yourself when you do well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good opportunity to just, try new things too. Like when you have a little bit of space, like that's the best time to experiment and to figure out what you like and what you don't like. Because if you have to, if you're starting with a huge space and you order, I don't know, 600 crowns of asparagus and then realize that you hate growing asparagus, like, whoa, that's a big investment that you just made to like realize that wasn't for you. So like take it as an opportunity to figure out what you like and what you don't like and what you want to scale and what you don't want to scale. And I think that's really like the core of kind of differentiating what's inspiration versus what is comparison. And it's kind of like we live in this Pinterest world where you're always scrolling and you're always looking and you're always seeing you're being bombarded by all of these things that are so perfectly curated for the platform that they're on. And that's not anybody's reality, is the reality of it.
It's very
yeah. So, I mean, I think that with all of that being said, we just want to encourage you guys that no matter where you are, no matter what stage of life you're in, whether you're working full time and you dream about, being a full-time farmer, or if you're working full time and you dream about working full time and being a little bit more sustainable and making choices that are going to impact the next generation of people because you have chosen to invest in sustainability. No matter where you are, we want you to know that you have a place in the garden, and we want to help you facilitate that. And we're really glad that you took the opportunity to sit down with a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is you're drinking and hang out with us today. So Jill, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And everyone, thanks for joining us. And if you're not already, find us both over on Instagram at Whispering Willow Farm and Uncommon Roots Homestead. Have a great day.
Bye.